Oysters play an important role in the bay by filtering water and providing habitat for sessile plants and animals. Back before they were harvested, it's estimated they were able to filter all of the water of the Chesapeake in about 3 days. Cleaner water meant more aquatic life, higher biodiversity, and a stronger ecosystem. Native populations have been harvesting oysters for centuries, even before the discovery of America by the Europeans. Once technology developed to the point where oysters could be harvested commercially, the population began to decline due to unsustainable harvesting practices. Now, the current oyster population is around 1% of what it once was. With the decrease in the oyster population, the bay has changed dramatically in appearance and health. Since oysters filter feed on phytoplankton, they were once able to keep the plankton level in check, but now they are overworked due to low numbers and environmental stress. With a better understanding now of oysters and their life cycles, we have been able to take small steps to try and bring their populations back up. Oysters continue to be harvested along with other fish populations by watermen, but with restricted areas and catch limits, there are signs of small increases in population since 1994. Watermen have been harvesting the various aquatic species of the Chesapeake since it was commercially viable. Since little was known about these aquatic populations and their roles in the environment, there were few restrictions on how many were harvested. Until the introduction of hydraulics, the process of harvesting oysters was physically demanding and produced a lower yield. In the beginning, long tongs were used to scoop them up, but this was time-consuming and required a larger crew to be able to produce a daily profit. Today, with hydraulics, it takes much fewer workers to produce a much higher yield in a shorter amount of time. Being a waterman is a revered occupation here in the Chesapeake and has been for many years. It is an occupation passed down through family generations, and the roots can be traced deep into the history of the Chesapeake. The tradition is a proud one that is still carried on today by the few men and women who live off the water. With all the new load limits placed on oysters in many protected areas, it is becoming harder for watermen to make a living off the once bountiful harvests of oysters. Many, in an effort to make a living, have turned to ecotourists to supplement their income. Their vast knowledge of the waters that make up the bay are what draws tourists to view what is left of the once thriving ecosystem. With a crumbling ecosystem and an ever-increasing demand for oysters, there are now ways to grow and harvest oysters without pulling them from the bay. A new technique called aquaculture is being used extensively in Virginia and is spread into Maryland and Delaware. The saltier water in Virginia is better for the oysters because it improves and quickens their spawning, but also increases their chance for getting disease. The oysters are also manipulated in a way that allows them to have 3 sets of chromosomes, making them triploid, compared to the natural diploid oyster. Being triploid, the oysters are larger, produce more meat, and mature quicker, since they don't have to deal with reproductive processes. With all the technological advances in the aquaculture of oysters, there is less strain on the native bay population, but there is now a new competition for the watermen. Traditional watermen see these practices as harmful to their way of life and means of making a living. Although seen as a negative, the oyster farming is lowering stress on native populations of oysters in the bay and its watersheds.